Hello guys, welcome back to the management of acute kidney injury. So in management, we will first talk about the aims of the management. The aims of the management is first correct the fluid and electrolyte imbalance. So the AKI is basically involved or related to the fluid imbalance and the electrolyte imbalance. As we know that the GFR is basically decreased in case of acute kidney injury. So that's why there is a fluid imbalance in the body, and due to the different electrolyte balance imbalance like the hyperkalemia, or there will be hypocalcemia, or there is a hyperphosphatemia, or there will be dilutional hyponatremia. So these are the electrolyte imbalance. We should manage those, and those electrolyte imbalance management is very necessary as they are life threatening. And we will also optimize the hemodynamic status, that what is the status of the heart, how is it working in that condition. So that status will be also optimized if required. So we will see this in further talks. And we should stop any nephrotoxic drug if it is given, like the aminoglycoside or amphotericin B or the NSAIDs or the SC inhibitors. And we will also treat basically the cause of the acute kidney injury. So these are the main aims for the management of acute kidney injury. So let's talk about the management of pre-renal acute kidney injury. So first of all, usually the pre-renal acute kidney injury is due to the condition like the blood loss, burns, pancreatitis, trauma, hypovolemia. So these are the things. These are the main causes of the acute kidney injury. So first of all, treat according to the cause. So basically, there is not problem in the kidney. The problem lies actually before the kidney, that is in the blood flowing to the kidney. So in severe acute blood loss, you have to give packed RBC as a fluid replacement. So you can give the packed RBC. In less acute blood loss, you can give the isotonic crystalloid, basically 0.9% normal saline, or you can also give the colloids. The same thing, isotonic crystalloid, that is 0.9% saline, can be given in case of burns, pancreatitis, any trauma, or hypovolemia. But you should consider one thing in mind, that in isotonic crystallite solution, 0.9% normal saline is somehow not preferred. 0.9% normal saline is somehow not preferred, as we know that the normal saline contain the chloride ion. And this chloride ion will ultimately lead to the hyperchloremic acidosis. They will actually increase the chloride level in the blood. So there will be the hyperchloremic and acidosis. As we know that the high chloride level, as we know that these chlorides are what? They are anions, and high level of anion will lead to the high anion gap. And we know that the high anion gap will lead to the metabolic acidosis. So in this way, the high level of chloride will ultimately cause the metabolic acidosis. So excess amount of the crystalloids, or 0.9%, basically in 0.9% normal saline cannot be given. So that's why to take a risk when we have another option in case of crystalloid. So we can give the we can give the Ringer lactate. Ringer's lactate solution, and it is very best for the acute kidney injury. So prefer Ringer lactate always, as they have no any risks of the metabolic acidosis. And Ringer lactate also contain the bicarbonate ions, which will ultimately decrease the acidosis possibility to happen. So Ringer lactate is basically preferred fluid in case of AKI. Okay. Now in case of the less severe hypovolemia, you can also use 0.45% only to actually avoid the risks of the hyperchloremic acidosis. But yes, if you are using the Ringer lactate, then there is no problem. And if, let's suppose, if there is a metabolic acidosis has already occurred, then you can use for the severe metabolic acidosis dextrose solution, that should contain the 150 milliequivalent of sodium bicarbonate. Not only in pre-renal AKI, but in all cases of AKI, there will be the hyperkalemia. And I have already discussed then what are the causes of hyperkalemia. One of the cause of hyperkalemia is acidosis, metabolic acidosis. So, the metabolic acidosis causes the hyperkalemia. As I have already said you, the metabolic acidosis can be treated with the sodium bicarbonate. So, can be treated with the sodium bicarb. But how to treat the hyperkalemia? So, the treatment of hyperkalemia basically depends upon the insulin and glucose infusion. So we should give the insulin and glucose infusion. They will actually reverse that condition, that they will actually take the potassium from the circulation to the cells, and that's why they will decrease the potassium level in the blood. So this is known as treatment. So the treatment of hyperkalemia is insulin and glucose infusion. Why we give the glucose infusion? As we know that the whenever we give insulin, they will ultimately also cause the hypoglycemia, and due to to avoid the hypoglycemia risks, we will give the glucose. That's why in metabolic acidosis we will give first of all three things. One is sodium bicarb, dextrose, and the insulin. So this sodium bicarb will correct acidosis. Dextrose and insulin will correct the hyperkalemia. So this is the actually protocol for the treatment of the hyperkalemia and metabolic acidosis. One of the cause of pre-renal AKI was congestive heart failure, and in this condition there will be the hemodynamic status will be somehow compromised, and due to which we should also give the ionotropic drugs and antiarrhythmic agent if there is any kind of arrhythmia. So antiarrhythmic agents can be given in case of the congestive heart failure or in any other condition where the heart function is decreased. Another cause of the pre-renal AKI was cirrhosis. So cirrhosis of liver. So how to treat the AKI in case of cirrhosis of liver? As we know that there will be in cirrhosis of liver there will be the ascites. That the ascites means there is a fluid in the peritoneal cavity. There is a fluid in the peritoneal cavity, that is excess fluid in the peritoneal cavity, and due to which there is a abdominal distension. So how will we manage this condition? And usually this fluid in the peritoneal cavity is related to the spontaneous acute bacterial peritonitis. That is spontaneous acute bacterial peritonitis. So the aim was to say that the ascites is also associated with the infection, and due to which there will be infection in the peritoneal cavity, and that will lead to the very dangerous condition. So the management will depend upon first of all to remove the ascites. So to remove the ascites we will give the protein. As we know, in cirrhosis of liver actually there is a very decreased level of protein in the blood, and due to this decreased level of protein in the blood there is basically decreased plasma oncotic pressure, and due to this decreased plasma oncotic pressure there was ascites. As the fluid cannot remain, if there is a decreased plasma oncotic pressure, the fluid in the blood cannot remain in the circulation, they will extravasate and they will ultimately cause the ascites, and due to which we should give the albumin therapy. So we should give albumin, basically 225 to 250 mg intravenous per day. So the amount of albumin is 25 to 250 mg intravenous per day, and we will also give the antibiotics to actually prevent the peritonitis. So antibiotics therapy can given, IV antibiotics. So in any AKI, in treatment, the first thing is input of fluid. in any AKI, the first treatment is input of fluid. So how much fluid should be given in any person? So once the person has a euvolemic, if the person is now euvolemic, that you manage the initial condition of the hemodynamic status and you manage the initial fluid replacement and electrolyte imbalances. Then once the patient is sent to the home for the maintenance therapy, what amount of fluid should be given? So the input of fluid is for the maintenance of the fluid in body, and for the maintenance of the fluid in body, the amount should be given as urine output. So whatever urine there is excreted per day, plus insensible water loss from the body. So what is insensible water loss from the body? The water loss in case of the stool, the water loss in case of the speaking. So whenever you speak, the water actually remove out like the in form of water vapor. So while speaking, whatever the water is removed from the body, and the water removed during any sweating. So this insensible water loss from the body is somehow the water loss that is apart from the urination, and this is almost 400 to 800 ml. This is almost 400 to 800 ml. In average, we took that the insensible water loss is 500 ml. In average, we take the insensible water loss is 500 ml. Now let's suppose if any person has yesterday the urine output is 200 ml. Let's suppose if any person has a urine output that is he urinates yesterday only 200 ml, then what amount of fluid should I give him today? So we will consider like this. The total fluid that is given to the patient is basically urine output plus insensible loss. So in average, we take the insensible loss of 500 ml and urine output is 200 ml. So the total amount of fluid that should be given to him today is 700 ml. So in this way, the amount of fluid that should be given is estimated. I have already said that there will be dilutional hyponatremia in case of the acute kidney injury, and if the sodium level decreases than 125 milli equivalent, then in this case it can precipitate the seizure, and that's why we should give now 3% normal saline. 3% normal saline should be given. In AKI, basically the person has bleeding and clotting disorders. The person may have the bleeding and clotting disorders, and due to this bleeding and clotting disorders, the person may have the GI bleeding. And to prevent the GI bleeding, you can give the actually S2 antagonist, and you can also give the proton pump inhibitors. Proton pump inhibitors can be given to prevent the GI bleeding. So S2 antagonist, that is antihistaminic like the ranitidine, and the proton pump inhibitors like the omeprazole, pantoprazole, rabeprazole. So pantoprazole. So like this drug can be given in order to prevent the GI bleeding. And the person of the AKI, so the person having the AKI is basically very prone to infections. As there in AKI there is decreased cellular and humoral immunity. and due to the decreased cellular humoral immunity, basically they are prone to infection, and due to which we should time to time, there should be the microbiological investigation should be done in order to the monitor the infection is present or not. Pulmonary edema can happen basically due to the excess fluid administration. So increased fluid administration relative to urine output. So in comparison to urine output, if there is excessive fluid administration, then it can cause pulmonary edema. And another thing is that in the AKI, there is increased pulmonary capillary permeability. That is, in the lungs, whatever the capillaries are present, there is increased permeability, and due to which the fluid present in the capillaries extravasate into the lung parenchyma and will result in the pulmonary edema. So these are the points that will lead to the pulmonary edema. And so in case of the pulmonary edema, you can give the furosemide. So furosemide can be given. This furosemide, it will increase the urinary output. Another thing, so furosemide is basically a diuretics, and it will ultimately increase the urinary output. And another thing, if there is a pulmonary edema, and let's suppose though the furosemide, if you give the furosemide, let's suppose the furosemide also doesn't work. So in case of the furosemide failure, that we have not achieved the good urinary output despite the intake of the furosemide, then what we will do in that case, we will go for the dialysis. So in that case, you will go for the dialysis. So this is one of the absolute indication for the dialysis, that if the pulmonary edema is not relieved in case of the diuretics, then we should go for the dialysis. Another thing, that the pulmonary edema temporarily may result in the dyspnea and decreased O2 saturation level. So the pulmonary edema may result to the dyspnea and decreased saturation level. In case of the saturation level less than 94%, we will actually go for the temporary respiratory support. So we will go for the temporary respiratory support. And in case of temporary respiratory support, we will give the continuous positive airway pressure. We will give the continuous positive airway pressure, that is known as CPAP. So CPAP is basically a kind of ventilation that is given to the patient, that is basically for the increased oxygen saturation level. And in case of the post-renal causes, that is, if there is a presence of the stone, then we can do the removal of the stone, and we can also go for the catheterization. What are the dietary instruction that should be given to the patient? So the dietary instruction is basically the protein content should not be high, should be almost in the range of 20 to 30 gram per day. But yes, carbohydrate amount should be high, so there should be high amount of carbohydrate. The calories intake should be greater than should be almost 2000 kilocalories per day, and the potassium should be restricted to 40 milli equivalent per day. So these are the dietary instruction should be taken in case of the acute kidney injury patient. So the last option left in the case of acute kidney injury is renal replacement therapy. So despite all the conservative measures like the fluid balance, electrolyte balance, nutritional balance, though the condition like the hyperkalemia, the fluid overload, the acidosis are not corrected, then we should think for the renal replacement therapy. Another condition, like if there is severe uremia and uremic pericarditis or the uremic encephalopathy. Usually the uremic encephalopathy is very rare, but if present, then these are the condition where the renal replacement therapy should be started.